If you're looking for a war on farms, look no further than the state of Oregon. Hey guys, welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Masse TV. Last year, if you guys remember, I had it out a little bit with the state-funded media out of Oregon because I said that Oregon was shutting down small farmers. To clarify, Oregon didn't shut down small farmers, they just made it financially impossible for them to proceed. Recent hearings coming out of the state of Oregon have indicated that farmers are actually throwing out produce. They use the word discarding produce. So they're throwing out produce because they're not allowed to sell it in the state of Oregon. Why? Because last year, Oregon decided to randomly implement enforcement of two rules, one of which was overturned. That was the ridiculous definition of what a CAFO is and trying to make anybody who has a milking cow or milking goats apply for certain wastewater systems that they could have never afforded. The other thing that shut down farms in the state of Oregon last year was when they decided to enforce a rule, and I'm going to get to this because they may have been overreaching in the first place. Well, I think they were overreaching to begin with, but under the state law, they may have been overreaching to even implement this, shutting farmers out of business, putting people out of business. If that was the case, I think these farmers should turn around and sue. But basically they said, look, you can't water your market garden or your 1 acre garden. A lot of these small farmers who take fresh food to farmers markets, they could not water their gardens and sell their produce because they didn't have water rights to do that. In the state of Oregon, a resident can pump up to 15,000 gallons of water without having to have a special water use permit. If you're a commercial business, you can pump up to 5,000 gallons of water a day without having to have a water rights permit. But there's been discussion on whether or not that includes irrigation. And that's because in the state of Oregon, when they passed the law, initially the concept was that they didn't want businesses needlessly watering landscapes around their businesses to attract customers. So they said that you couldn't use it for irrigation. However, there is the Legislative Legal Counsel, I think is what they're called. It's the Office of Legislative Counsel, which advises lawmakers on legal matters. They're saying that the Oregon Water Resources Department appears to have wrongly prohibited small farms from using domestic wells on commercial crops. Imagine that. A bureaucracy coming in, making up their own rules and shutting down farmers. It happens all over the place, all over the time. And Oregon is one of those places, they lose over 4% of their farmland each year. They're just shutting down their farms left and right. So while they've come to that conclusion because basically they're saying that these market gardeners are creating a commercial product and selling it to the consumer, therefore there doesn't need to be any changes to legislation. The Department of Justice of Oregon has stated otherwise, saying, well, it specifically says non-commercial irrigation. So it's interesting, to see how this whole thing unfolds. But there is a bill. And I talked about this last year. There was a bill being proposed last year. It's kind of been tossed around. It actually had a significant number of votes in the House. This is a bipartisan bill. It's called House Bill 3372. And what that would do is it would allow these market gardeners to be able to, once again, water their crops and sell it to the consumer versus throwing it out. And yes, according to the Capitol Press, farmers have stated that they are having to discard their produce. House Bill 3372 would actually allow them to irrigate up to 3,000 gallons of water per day without having a water rights permit. However, remember, a commercial user, an industrial user, a lot of these people can use up to 5,000 gallons per day without having a water rights. So I kind of feel like, it's a step in the right direction, but there's still not giving farmers the full benefit that they're giving other commercial users. And, what's interesting is this mainly applies to well users, people who are in rural areas. People who live in cities can pretty much do whatever they want to. But the problem is that House Bill 3372 isn't going to eliminate this problem. And in fact, I think that more farms, medium-sized farms, large farms, and small farms are going to be impacted by House Bill 1154, which is going to offer further restrictions to the Water Resources Department on what they are allowed to restrict from these groundwater users using water in areas that they deem to be having groundwater quality problems. Senate Bill 1154 expands restrictions over water rights, particularly in areas with groundwater quality problems. This bill directs multiple state agencies to take specified actions in areas potentially increasing regulatory burdens on basically any farm of any size. The other thing that they're doing in Oregon is they have House Bill 3419, which would require any well user, every well user, to install monitoring devices on their wells and report how much water they're actually using to the state regulatory agency so that they can further restrict them. Both of these bills would have further implications on what a lot of these small farmers are able to do with their well water. So I don't think small farmers are necessarily going to be out of the woods with the passage of 3372, but it is a step in the right direction to at least give them 3,000 gallons of water a day when other commercial users can use up to 5,000 gallons of water a day, and home residences could use up to 15,000 gallons of water a day. Many of you have noticed that we keep wearing these leather patch hats that say Defend the Right to Farm on them. These leather patch hats support our nonprofit, Meet My Neighbor Productions. You can get your hat at Masse Trading Co. and help us defend the right to farm through education, outreach, and, as we've been doing over the last couple of years, farm relief efforts. So get your leather patch hat and let others know that you defend the right to farm. There's another bill that threatens the viability of family farms in Oregon. Most of the farms in Oregon are family farms. And it's a rather staggering statistic to consider that between the years 2017 and 2022, nearly 2,000 family farms have been wiped out of the state of Oregon. If you're looking for a war on farms, look no further than the state of Oregon, or a lot of the other western states. But House Bill 2548 is a bill that would form what they're calling a Farm Worker Standards Board with the authority to set industry-wide standards on wages, benefits, and working conditions. This bill would also eliminate at-will employment. So if you're a farmer and you have an employee on your farm, you can't fire them at will. You'd have to come up with a specific reason as to why you're firing them. And I think that, this is one of those issues where the government is really overreaching by getting involved with the private, what I would consider a private relationship between an employer and a worker. You're the boss. You should have the right to hire and fire people as you see fit to run your business to make it profitable. If somebody is just simply not pulling their weight, you should have the right to just simply fire them. I mean, it's as simple as that. People should not go out getting jobs as if it's a right. They have a right to that job. They should stay in that job, and their employer should have absolutely no right to fire them. That's ridiculous. We see this all the time with the Trump administration and government employees. People sit in those chairs thinking that they have a right to be there and nobody can do anything about it. It's a job. You have to perform. Jobs have always been based on merit until recent years. And now we're in the business of telling private employers whether they can or cannot fire somebody. So basically, this agency would centralize a lot of the control over the agricultural sector and allow them to mandate new rules and regulations on farms without having to go through, the process of voting at the state legislature. There's also in the state of Oregon House Bill 4002, which is an overtime law. And one of the things that we've seen in states that have faced overtime pay laws is they actually reduce the number of workers that they have or reduce the number of hours that they can work. And a lot of these seasonal workers come in for the purpose of the fact that they can work overtime and really build up hours during a certain part of the year. And so what we've seen are farmers cutting them off because if they go over so many hours, then they have to pay overtime. So instead what they've been doing is giving people less hours. I think that people who bought into this concept of, oh, well, we're going to stand up for your rights and get you overtime pay on that farm and make you more money, were short-sighted on that, because the farmers can't simply afford to pay the overtime pay. So these are just some of the issues that I think farms in Oregon are facing right now. And I wanted to do this video because I was reading, in the Capitol Press earlier this month about these farmers that are throwing out food at a time when food prices are high, and it's the most ridiculous thing in the world because of this legislation. And then you have two different government bodies advising lawmakers, one of them saying, no, it's perfectly legal for them to water their gardens, and it was an overreach from the beginning. And the other one saying, well, technically, you can cut them off because it says for non-commercial irrigation only, right? But I think it's worth drawing attention to. I think that the state of Oregon is facing a lot of challenges when it comes to their small farmers. They've lost over 2,000 farms in a very short period of time. And I also think it's important to note that, a lot of these decisions that have come out of the state of Oregon have shut down small farms and continue to do so. If these bills go through, some of these bills that I talked about here today, they will have an impact on more farms in the state of Oregon. Anyway, guys, I'll post some more videos this week. I hope you have a good day, and we'll talk soon.
Ancient eras and natural selection have refined and tailored pristine fibers with the resilience for today's days. Evolving beyond the last ice age, bison wool is nature's most dependable activewear. Buffalo Wool Company, 100% proven by nature, 100% American made.
Check out the Buffalo Wool Company collection at yanasatradingco.com.